Hello, and welcome to the 9th episode of Goffstown's Grizzled Grizzlies. I'm Mike McKinnon.
And I'm Eric Emmerling. And Jim Boschman is back on the show. And his intentions on this show are simple. He's going to take us back to school in a one-room schoolhouse. Inside one of the many one-room schoolhouses that dotted across Goffstown centuries ago. And hundreds of one-room schools dotted the landscape of New Hampshire in the past centuries. And they were the backbone of primary education for generations of children. The one-room schoolhouse is revered in books and television and movies, but like most ideas viewed nostalgically, they actually were beset with many problems that are still perplexing educators and students today, like how to finance the cost, measuring student development and achievement, and establishing the right kind of curriculum to satisfy the community. Jim Boschman's done all the work on this stuff, and he's the guy that's passionate about Goffstown and its history. And he's also part of our local history. For instance, Jim became interested in growing large pumpkins, and his interest outgrew his pasture, so he created New Hampshire's first ever giant pumpkin weigh-off-in regalia back in 2020. 25 years ago, 26 years ago. And his fingerprints are still all over our town's Old Home Day celebration. And he's the man that's developed the trolley and the downtown walking tours that a lot of people take off on. Jim's family ties date back early in the 20th century when his great-great-great-grandfather worked in the mills and lived on Manchester's west side. And his grandfather moved to New Boston. And then his father finally stretched his arms and got into Goffstown. And that's been the only home Jim's really known. A curator at the Goffstown Historical Society, dating back 12 years, he spent countless days and months reading and studying the history, any history he could get his hands on about our fair city, including every edition of the Goffstown News and all the letters, ledgers, and journals stored in the archives in the Historical Society. And Jim saw how these lessons learned from the past help explain where we are presently. And who wants to keep repeating the same mistakes? Jim's also discovered how looking at our shared past links community, and we are able to cultivate our culture, heritage, and our values across generations and generations. One-room schoolhouses were prevalent in rural educational centers in the 19th and early 20th centuries, where a single teacher taught grades 1 through 8 in a one room. These schools featured multi-age cooperative learning and often they lacked plumbing or electricity. The curriculum often based on basic education like reading, writing, and arithmetic. And the one teacher often utilized peer tutoring, getting the older kids to help the younger students. Students walked to and from school. They brought their own lunches. They used shared water buckets to drink. And the buildings that were around also acted as a community center, helping develop programming in our town.
Welcome again, Jim. Before we go any further, any pictures we show tonight are courtesy of the Goffstown Historical Society. And again, I will plug anybody who has any interest in the history of this community. The Historical Society has a wealth of information and artifacts. And when they're open, it's a great place to visit. Jim, Eric alluded to your passion for the history of Goffstown. What drives that passion? I'm going to tell you, in talking to you over the last few weeks at different times, I find not just the passion, but the energy you put in discussing it. It's contagious. What got you started really in focusing on the history of Goffstown?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me again, you guys. It is a pleasure to be here. And what started my interest right from the beginning, basically, is the connection I've always had with Goffstown, and to put hands on things, things that were here 100 years ago. They're still here, and to be able to just connect and think about our the people that came before us, this was part of their life. It's now part of ours, and it'll go on to be part of the next generation. And the schoolhouse is a good example. I mean, I'm fascinated with education began in these little one-room schoolhouses, and so I just between the hotels and the lodging in Goffstown, just what went on here is just fascinating. And so I just grabbed onto it and connected with it. And
It's kind of, I think, what you see in today, where a lot of people have their DNA tested and they do some research in their own history, and that passion is really growing. And I think it goes along with your overall passion.
Yeah, and to be able to tell people a story that may connect with their home or their ancestors, and I know I'm telling you facts, and everything I'm telling you, it was written down somewhere, and I'm just passing it on. So you can see I get a big enjoyment out of that, sharing the facts.
How many school districts did Goffstown have, and how were they formed?
Well, going back, there's evidence of one-room schoolhouses back to 1773. But it wasn't until 1805 when they started creating these districts. The town of Goffstown said we need to create districts throughout the community. By 1805, we had 7 districts. Up on the mountain, we had a schoolhouse. We had 2 in the village. So there were 7. By 1873, we were up to 13 districts. And then finally in 1910, we were up to 16 districts. And when I say districts, that's a district being a little corner of the community of Goffstown, but it stretched all the way to Manchester now. So we had schoolhouses all over Goffstown, and 16 schoolhouses required 16 teachers, 16 committees to look over the schools. So it was a big commitment by the town, and you're going to find as we move along here, they finally realize if we can get all these children to come to one school in the center of town, which was the white school on School Street. Today it's the office of the superintendent on School Street. Boy, we can cut down on a lot of expenses and a lot of the problems they were having maintaining 16 schoolhouses. And that's exactly how it came about.
So you've got I get that each district was kind of like its own building of itself, and as more people grew up in an area, they needed a bigger school, so they got together and they built a new district.
And you're going to learn as we go along. Grassmere, they had 2 schools because there were a lot of kids, and Grassmere is where Goffstown began. There were a lot of children, and one of the facts that went along with that is the industry. There was the Cheney's pulp mill down by Henry Bridge, and all the workers had kids. Needed more schools, so you're going to learn about that. It was the District 9. We had 2 schools there because of the amount of kids. But you're right. There were some schools had 4 to 6 kids in them, but those kids deserved an education.
Sure.
So that's how it worked.
Now,
Who would oversee these school districts and manage them?
there was an administration? They weren't just like Laura Wingle, like the Little House on the Prairie, where just one lady does whatever she wants?
Well, there was, of course, each schoolhouse had a school mistress, which would have been your female teacher, or a schoolmaster, which was the male teachers. This is in the beginning. This is they were referred to. But overseeing all the districts, you had 2 committees, a superintending committee, and that was 3 to 4 gentlemen usually, and they would over the decision making for the schools and whether the teachers were reaching, what was expected of them, and also the students. Were they scholars? Were they getting what needed to be gotten out of the school system? So they were overseeing the accomplishments of each school. Then that was the superintending committee. And then there was the prudential committee, which was one gentleman who basically did the hiring and firing of the teachers, and he made sure that the schools were up to snuff as far as safety, heated, required a lot of cordwood to heat these schoolhouses, and it was his job to make sure it was all collected ahead of time, and stacked and ready for them each day. So that was committees.
I'm going to assume that they didn't just turn on the oil burner or gas stove.
Oh my God! Can you imagine? Each schoolhouse had either a little fireplace or a little potbelly stove, and it was the duty of each student and his parents or her parents were required to provide one cord of wood per school that their child attended, and it was typical of the young students who lived closest. They got in early, and they started up the stove or the fireplace ahead of time. And I always get a big thrill out of the Patty Hill Schoolhouse, which was up on the corner of Snook Road, and that was the Whipples were right there, the old Shows Farm, and there were a couple boys there, Earl and his brother. They were the first ones in every morning, start the fire. So they gave them some responsibility. So that's about the heating.
Now I take this was before school buses. So how did the kids get there? Was there a school wagon or?
You just think about it. There were children this might have been your district, but you were still half a mile from the school. You might have been a mile from the school, the nearest school. So you were on foot, or I read where a lot of times different parents would take the initiative and hook up a horse and buggy and pick up a few kids and get them in there. They realized how important this education was for the children, and so they all they pitched in. They pitched in, and especially you're going to find out when they all started going to the white school in the center of town. Well, that was quite an effort to get your children from Page Hill Road into the center of town. And so there was being asked of the parents at that time.
What months did the kids attend school?
In the beginning, it was pretty much winter and fall only, because they were all farmers and farming, and they needed their kids home, in the gardens and the fields, and they needed their kids in the summer months. Sure. As the years went on, education became more prioritized, and so the kids were being asked. They were doing some early summer, like they do now. So there was more schooling as the years went on, but in the beginning it was strictly winter and fall. Yep.
Now in the beginning, when these parents put together the school districts, were those parents, were they educated at one point in time, or are we talking about this as like these people wanting to get the best for their children and get them to do better off? Yeah,
the parents had some education, but they all, from what I'm understanding, wish they had opportunities for more.
Okay.
And so they're bringing the children the distance to get, whether it's basic math skills or some writing skills, they knew how important it was because they had very little themselves. I found an old diary, and it was a well-kept little diary. I'm talking 4x4 diary, and it was a young boy on Page Hill Road who attended the school up there, and he was so proud of his ability to put his journal together on a daily basis because his mom and dad couldn't do it. They didn't have the writing skills that he had, and so he knew. And that little journal is on display or available if anybody wants to go to the Historical Society.
In the early years of these one-room schoolhouses, were girls allowed to go to school? Were there any challenges there? I get my history from a visual history from Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah.
Laura Ingalls always went to school and taught.
Yeah, no, they were all children were welcomed, and to my understanding, it was never even children of color. There were not many in Goffstown. There was no discrimination at all. So it was you tended to see more girls than boys. This classroom had 11 girls and 4 boys. So the numbers always lean towards the girls.
Now, I wonder if was it optional? Was it maybe some families kept the guys home to do more of the work?
Yeah, it was all you weren't ordered to send your kids to school. I mean, you did what was best for your family.
No truant officers.
Right, and so let's understand here now. Not all the kids wanted to be there. They were there because their parents made them. So there was some delinquency, and we'll learn a little bit more about that and how that was handled. But some kids, these superintendent committees kept journals of how the school was doing. And you're gonna hear, you'll be reading a few of those journal inserts that the young boys were not of approval to the superintending committee. So it's pretty interesting.
You alluded to that everybody was welcome, and are there any records of any free people of color or indigenous people attending Goffstown schools?
Yeah, I've read nothing that distinguished the different, and the children were children. And there was never, no descriptions or talk of that, but it was always the young scholars. They were recognized all as scholars, not just those that overachieved. They were all scholars, and just male and female. So it was they put these kids, they put them not on a pedestal, but they made them feel like they were special. They were a special privilege of being in the schools. So that was, and it was. Yep.
Now, do you remember where were some of these school districts' locations?
Oh, I know right where they all were, and we're gonna share where they were and where they went. And I've managed to put some photos together of the then and now. What it looked like then, and because most of them, I think I counted, there's a dozen or so that are still have been turned into residents, and so we're going to talk about that a little bit too.
Do you want to start listing them? Let's go with the District 1.
Okay, District 1.
Where was it?
Yeah, District 1 is, that's a cute little place that was right. It's still there today. It's on Mountain Road. About a half a mile up on Mountain Road from today's Cumberland Farms. It's up on the right, just beyond the old, it was, what was that? On the left was the
Masonic Temple?
Masonic Temple.
Oh,
So
okay.
just a little after the Masonic Temple on the right. And this was a little schoolhouse. It was one of the first that was shut down. The 2 village schools were the first to shut down. That was one, and that was considered the village school south. Okay, because we had a village school north on Mass Road, North Mass. But this one, it was shut down, I think it was about 1853, and just in disrepair. But it was good enough to be sold to somebody. All the schools, they ended up being either auctioned off or sold outright. And Dr. Alonzo Carr purchased that. And we remember him in our last show.
Sure.
That's right.
And so he, and through my research, there were a total of close to 50 different homeowners who bought that place over the years. And today it is being lived in, and it should be up on our screen right there. You can see, well, that's right behind us. You can see a then and now, and so it's really exciting to see these schoolhouses continue on. 137 years old. That's and I would enjoy living in one myself.
Well, you've given us these journal entries that the superintendents wrote, and I have one here for District 1. It's an 1859 entry. Teacher Miss Sarah H. Prince was not as successful as we had hoped. Though entitled to the credit of endeavoring to do well, one cause of her failures considered the fact that she had 64 students attending and only seating for 48.
Can you imagine that?
Overcrowding even back then.
Yeah, overcrowding, and so all the pressure was put on the teacher, and then you got to try harder, and of course overcrowded led to a little mischief making, and could have been a little disappointment in that end of things, and these children, that school was closed. It was actually 1873, just before they built the white school. But it was so bad they had to get them out of there, and they brought them all over to the town hall and to the basement of the town hall, and they finished their schooling there for a couple of years until they could move them into the white building.
Oh.
And so that was referred to as the United School in the town hall. And right in the center of Goffstown, in the basement. It was only for 2 years, and it was only a couple of schoolhouses. As they closed them, they shipped them into there to finish it up until the white school, because the white building had been approved, and it took them 2 years to build it. 73, 74, and it opened in 75. 1873, 1874. And so that's where those kids went.
How about the District 2? Is that the mountain school?
District 2 was up on the back mountain, and that one was really interesting. A lot of history went on there, and those brown boys and those brown girls, they were all high top honor scholars. And you read the journal, I think, and it states how believe it or not, there were other kids whose name wasn't Brown, because it was all Browns who made the honors that year. It did slip, and it slipped in attendance in 1874, and it was quite a few years there. They didn't have many kids at the school, and so they shipped them. They had the kids go to New Boston School, to the center of New Boston, because technically Roby Road, the school wasn't far from the Roby Road and Back Mountain Road, and so. But after several years of going to New Boston, finally they brought in a teacher. Her name was Miss Bertha French, and she stayed with the Brown family, Lucy and John Brown, and she stayed with them. Because let's remember now, that was part of these young school teachers. Part of they only made like $5 to $9 a month, but they get free room and board at the home of one of the scholars. And so Bertha was brought to the Brown home, and she was a high-end teacher from what the superintendent's the journal read, and she brought that school back to life for another 20 years. But then it all fizzled out, and that was all part of moving everybody to the white school.
Sure. And as you just alluded to, you have that 1912 journal entry. Honor roll students: Richard C. Brown, John A. Brown, Harold C. Brown, Mildred A. Brown, Margaret O. Brown. And like you said, there were other students in that class, but they just were the only ones that made the honor roll that term.
Yeah, that's nice to see. And you guys, what's a big enjoyment of mine also, and we ought to do a show on it sometime, is some of the grave sites in the graveyards in Goffstown. And you go up on the Shirley Hill Cemetery, and there's John Brown, and there's all those Browns that were, it's really, and they stayed up on the mountain, and they're there today, yeah.
District 3.
District 3, probably one of my most memorable, and it's still here today. It's a residence today. It's up on Shirley Hill, and a little red schoolhouse up there. It's a little red house now, and so much history. It was originally built on Tipping Rock Road. Now, can you imagine in those winters with the snow, those open fields up there and the snow drifts, those kids were walking down Shirley Hill Road to Back Mountain Road, up Tipping Rock Road. Finally, our superintending committee got together and said, It is with sadness we have to watch our young scholars travel these roads on foot. We must bring the school closer to the Shirley Hill area, and they did. It was by oxen, and they pulled that school from Tipping Rock Road up to Shirley Hill Road to where it sits today. And that was the last schoolhouse that operated. And it was 1946 is when it closed its doors. And the final scholars went to the white school in the center of town. And we have people, Paul Welch. We have people today, surviving people who attended that school. The Yanakopoulos. They're still around today. They're in their 80s and 90s, but they attended that school. And that's and like I said,
Wow.
there was a little story recently how Paul Welch found home plate. It was a big flat rock by the school. This is the summer that just passed. He found home plate. It was such a perfect flat rock, and everybody was like observing it and saying, "Wonder what this was about." Paul Welch, he still lives right down the street. He said that was home plate. They took a picture of him with a bat. He's 92 years old, I think, and he had a bat. And he's so there's a tremendous history with that school, and so it's still there today.
Wow, it's pretty amazing that people were off in World War II, but they came from were still working out of a one-room school. I mean, it's You think how history sometimes moves slowly, sometimes quicker.
Yeah. Of course, you're going to remember. So the white building was fully occupied, and they had built the new high school right next to it.
Okay.
And in 1924, 25, that was built, but they were still going to the one-room schoolhouse.
Sure.
It was so convenient at that time, and it was highly rated and doing well, so they kept it going.
Do we have a picture of that schoolhouse? Is that it right
Well, there it is.
There
we go.
Yeah. And it's kind of hard to in the picture. It was originally sideways, and the side of the house faced the road. But they moved it when it became a residence. They made a foundation and they swung the house around to face the road, as it is today. And so it's I'm happy for the people. They appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the journal entry was from 1851. This schoolhouse presents nothing very attractive, unless it is the wind whistling through the crevices or the creaking of the old rickety seats that appeals. Perhaps there may be pleasure in wading through deep snow on an untraveled back road.
Yeah. So, and those superintending committee, they told it like it was. The wind was howling through the cracks, and they kind of had time keeping that place warm. But that's what they were up against. And remember, earlier years, no electricity. You couldn't even put the lights on. You were using lanterns, and I urge anybody who's watching right now to visit. Well, we're going to get to it. The Page Hill School has been preserved, and it's on display at the Goffstown Historical. We'll go over that when we get to it, but you'll see how they lived, how they went to school there.
Sure.
Yep.
Well, District 4.
4 was the Kennedy Hill School, cute little school, right on the corner of Addison and Kennedy Hill Road. And that was I think that brought in kids, actually came from Penardville, went there, and then there were kids surrounding, Addison Road, that's Shirley Hill Road. So eventually when it closed, they sent those kids up to the Shirley Hill School, because I think it was 1896 to 1820 is when the enrollment really declined. So that was the end of it, and I always found it pretty interesting. It went for auction, and I think we have a picture of the poster that was all over town. It was an auction a poster, and it said you could own the Kennedy Hill Schoolhouse, and it was purchased.
There we go, right behind us.
There it is, yeah,
There, okay.
Auction Kennedy Hill Schoolhouse, Saturday, July 20th, 1940. And so somebody bought it real cheap and made a home out of it. And it's a beautiful little home right now, and I'm happy for the people who appreciate it.
Sure.
And live there, yep.
Let's see, do we have a journal entry there? Oh, we do. In 1872, superintendent said, "This is a small but pleasant school. The parents are mostly very much interested in the progress of their children and are taking seriously of rebuilding their somewhat dilapidated schoolhouse this coming season. It is a hope they will. The location is pleasant and convenient."
Yeah, yeah. There was no bad words to talk about. It was just the enrollment declined, and they had to move on, and that's what you'll see. Things shrunk, and that white school was absorbing and they finally figuring things out. That you know what, bring them all to one central location.
Sure. District 5?
Oh, the Mass Road School. Great little history there. Started out kind of down by the corner of 114 and Mass Road. There's a little road. It's called Red Pine. It's a dead-end road. I think the Pepin. Well, anyways, it's a little dead-end road. It was on the corner there, and then it moved to the corner of Mass Road in Lynchville Park. And then finally, its final move, a third time, into Bernardville. And it was placed right to the left of today's Bartlett School. I think we got a real nice picture of it right beside the Bartlett School. You can see.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the last known memories and pictures of it was 1921, I believe it was, and it was a little welding shop. And at that point, because all the scholars are now they're taking them by trolley.
Oh, that's right, the trolley.
The trolley was running now. They were taking them to Goffstown, to the white school, and it turned into a little welding shop. And then eventually the Bartlett School was built to replace the Mass Road School.
Well, you have a journal entry for this one. In 1893, the schoolhouse was remodeled. The old benches and desks were taken out and a new floor laid. It is fitted with new furniture. It is now one of the best schoolhouses in town.
Yeah, yeah. That's really, and if you ever get a chance to read one of Doug Gove's history books, he talked to a lot of Bernardville residents who kind of remembered it. And that was one of them, the 1921 was the last memory of it, but a few other people remembered seeing it. So it's he's got a good little chapter on that schoolhouse, yeah.
It's very nice. District 6.
District 6 was the Amoskeag, that was the Amoskeag School. People, hard to believe that we had a schoolhouse down by, close to the Amoskeag Bridge on the Goffstown Back Road. Now you got to remember, Goffstown owned all the way to Eddy Road, and that was McGregorville down there. And that was all before Goffstown. Eventually, that was all that land. 4,000 acres annexed to Manchester in later years. But back then, that school was annexed to Manchester because it was, there were, from what I understood, there's 2 or 3 Goffstown kids in there, and then there was Manchester kids. So it was like they handed it over to Manchester and said, why don't you take over? There's no known photos of it, so I was unable to get, so I got a picture of the location roughly from what the description was.
Now, is that something, do you know if that's something the 2 communities had to vote on? One to accept it and one to reject it, or to pass it on?
Not on the schoolhouse. In later years, annexing 4,000 acres was a lot. There was some voting done there, and it was pretty interesting how it all worked out. But the school annexing, and we're going to learn about. I think we're going to go at some point at the Dow School. That was another one on the Goffstown Back Road. We gave that to Manchester too. But yeah,
District 7.
District 7 was the east East Goffstown School, which would have been up the Terrell Hill Road, Montalona Road. Okay, that was I found that one pretty fascinating. And a lot of these schools, what made them so interesting was you saw the names that were connected to the school. And when I think we got a real good picture right here. That's the East Goffstown School, which was on the corner of Montalona and Terrell Hill Road, real close to Grady Hill Road. Yeah. Well, guess what? There's 2 or 3 Gradys in that picture. And one of them ended up buying, I think it was John Grady, he bought the school when they closed it. Oh. And he fixed it up and converted it into a little house and a residence. Not for himself, but he probably rented it. But I loved when you found a lot of these old schoolhouses story, there was a lot of times the classrooms that went with it and names. And growing up in Goffstown, I looked at those names and said, like the Shirley Hill, I knew the Yanacopouses and the Welches and you connect the names. And here was the same way, the Grand Masons, there were names that their kids went to school with me. So that's the connection you made, But that was that particular school. I think it was like 1848 is when they converted it to a house, and then finally it became so dilapidated. They let the Goffstown Fire Department burn it down. It was a practice exercise. And that was the end of it. No, there's no more photos, that was the end of the history of that particular school.
Oh, there was a controversial little part of we found in the journal entry, and 1858. The superintendent said that the teacher failed in sustaining the position of a teacher. The report stated, "Why can we expect a good school when the teachers encourage their children in disobedience at school? Many of the parents say that their actions as well as their words. If you do not whip all the children but mine, you shall not teach school. But if you touch mine, I will make all the trouble I can." And they do not hesitate to use any means to accomplish this purpose. So they had corporal punishment back in those days?
Can you imagine that? You told it, and this superintending committee, they told it how it was. They were holding nothing back. And as we had talked about earlier, I believe, they eventually were asked, to calm down, because these were in the annual report that everybody received. And who wants to read about their children, the disobedience and what went on? And it was taking up too much time, all these journal entries they were making. So that kind of changed things around, yep.
And then District 8, the Tibbetts Hill School.
Tibbetts Hill School, Tibbetts Hill, still there today. You would never make the comparison. You would never make the comparison because it's changed so much. But the actual shell of the schoolhouse is still there. I think it's in this picture here. You can see. As a matter of fact, I just took this picture the other day. I took a ride up there because I didn't have a now picture, but that's what it looked like a week ago. So, that was originally it was 200 feet further south, but it was in a bad. There was no playground. There was no room for the children for activities, recess time. So they moved it 200 yards north of where it was. They bought, I believe, a half an acre for $25, and they moved the school there, and it was actually pretty successful. They sold it in 1954 is when it was. Actually, it was 1954 before it was converted into a house. So it sat there for quite a while, but the residence is still there today. So it's seen a few owners.
Yeah, they had some trouble there. In a 1902 journal entry said, an epidemic of unrest broke out during the term. We supplied a good spanking, which proved something to the entire school. And no more trouble was experienced after that.
A good spanking, Don't spare the rod and spoil the child. That's. That was a good little school. There again, it eventually, out of the way and moved the children to the white school.
What about District 9?
District 9 and 16, they kind of went together. That was your center of Grassmere. And there was the cutest little school. And so many people here are going to remember it in its later years. It became, District 9 was right beside today's Grange Hall, or the town hall in Grassmere, right beside it.
Okay.
And when it's, as the superintendent committee explained, it's bulging at the seams. We must do something soon. And that's when they built in 1889 the town hall / schoolhouse. Well, they sold District 9 schoolhouse, and they sold it to the Methodist Church, which was on the corner of Henry Bridge and Center Street. That burnt down in the early 2000s. It burnt right to the ground.
Wow.
But what they did, their church was a one level, like a little ranch, one level. They cut the roof off completely, and they put School 9 on top of it and made it a 2-floor church. The bottom floor was the meeting house, and the top floor was the actual church. And that was the Methodist Church. Armin Bissonnette went on to purchase this. Everybody knows the Armin Bissonnette and the whole Bissonnette family. They're still around town. A few of them are still, I believe, still around. And that's where their home was. That's where they raised their children, before, after the Methodist Church sold and relocated, the Bissonnettes bought it. But that's where District 9 was. The District 16 was on Greer Road at the time. There was a little schoolhouse down there. They moved up to the town hall. And then right here you can see this was that's the Town Hall Grange School on the right, and then the District 9 that was sold to Armin Bissonnette or to the Methodist Church at the time. But the little school on Greer Road was actually, those children were all moved up to District 9 also.
Why would they have had 2 schools in such close proximity? Any idea?
That's a great question. Like a few people have asked me that. From what I can understand, and I've taken out of it, there was big industry down on Henry Bridge Road. It is the Cheney Pulp Mill. It was huge. And there were fields on both sides where they would lay out the pulp to dry. And they employed a lot of people. And with these employed, parents came children. So they had a lot of children down there. So they actually needed their own little school. Because there was, but when the pulp mill burned, the attendance, shrunk. People moved, and so the schoolhouse, didn't have as many in it, and so they took what few they had and they moved them up into the center of Grassmere to the center school, and they eventually closed that little Greer schoolhouse.
Well, I know that center of Grassmere School you're talking about. When I started elementary school at Maple Ave,
Yeah.
I had friends that were still going to that school, and about 4th grade, they closed that school down, and they all
Yeah.
transferred over to either Bartlett.
The Georgianus boys all went there.
Oh, did
Dickie
they really?
and
Oh, yeah.
Peter, that's where they all went to school. The Uptons, all the Upton children, Gil Upton and Arlene Upton is the cousin of Gil, and her brothers went to that school, the Days, and so it was a lot of, I think even, there's a number of kids I went to school that attended it too. So that's pretty interesting, yep.
Now, the District 10 school, Patty Hill, I think I saw this, I can't resist but read this journal entry in
Okay, go ahead.
1864. It says, this school appears to be free from that spirit of roughness and disposition of evil, which is too often seen in our schools. Miss Nettie Hart, by her pleasant address, patience, and ambition, gained the goodwill of her pupils and accomplished a noble work.
That's nice. Yeah,
Now that is,
yeah. That's they wrote it the way it was, and that was That is the Patty Hill School is on the corner of Patty Hill and Snook Road, and it's still there today. And it's empty, and it's in the same. It's just the same. It hasn't been touched. New roof in 1956. Tommy Hall from Hall's TV bought it because his wife had a horse across the street, and he needed a place to keep the hay. So he stored the hay in there. And since Tommy has passed on, his son Jimmy inherited the whole property there, including the schoolhouse. And I made a generous offer to him back in 2018. I wanted to buy that schoolhouse, and I wanted to refurbish it. But Jimmy wasn't interested. I'm hoping he's watching this, and maybe he'll rethink my offer, because I would refurbish that. It needs to be saved, and if we can get Jimmy on board at some point, we'll save it, because it had a new roof in 1956, and I don't think it's been changed since. So its years are numbered, I believe.
I don't know if most people, when they're driving up Patty Hill Road, they go by it every day on the way to Dunbarton and Hoxton.
And that's the school I was mentioning earlier, was close to the Whipple farm, which became the Shose farm. And the Whipple boys used to start the stove early in the morning, but there's a lot of stories about them. And they raised a little bit of hell themselves, and they were part of that reasoning for that poor superintendent and journal entry. But that was Patty Hill School.
So, all these schools had their own personalities then.
Yeah, they certainly did.
What about District, where are we now? 11. District 11.
That would have been the Parker School, which was Gorham Pond Road, and it was called the Parker School. That saw a lot of history. That school was moved 3 times. It's in its 3rd location right now. It was further up, and they would realize, we're making these kids walk up this road. So it ended up, it's about 1/8 of a mile. It's right up the street from the Historical Society. It's on the right. I think we have a nice then and now. There it is.
Oh, okay.
You can see the roof lines, all the same. I believe it's red in color now, and it's been cherished and well taken care of through the years. But that was the Parker School. I have a good friend. His nickname's Willie, and he's a Williams. He lives up in Ware, New Hampshire. He's 92 years old, and he showed me recently a picture of him and his brother went to school there.
Oh, that's cool.
And so there's still a few around that enjoyed it. The school was closed and actually early it had several moves, but it officially became a residence in 1943, and it's been a residence since. So that's the Parker School.
Yeah, it was an interesting journal entry in 1902 at the Parker School. Finding the law of love was not appreciated. We decided to include a liberal supply of the rod of correction among the necessities of the fall and winter terms. Mr. Edwin Colby of Bow, an expert physician in such cases, faithfully applied the medicine.
Yeah.
And the school was a success. Huh?
Yeah, that's what it took, Yeah. Sometimes they needed, and that was even happens in today's schools. Sometimes you get that kid who just needs a good talking to.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's amazing to me what we've dealt with in these schools is how one teacher can impact like one person forever and ever and ever, or a whole school of people. And you don't realize that how the influence you make on one person may last for generations.
Yeah.
Right. District 12.
District 12 is if there's anybody watching and wants to put their hands on a piece of history, this school is available for anybody watching to go and see, go inside, sit in a desk from the old days, check out the potbelly stove. This school is the Page Hill School. It later became known as the Little Red Schoolhouse. The story goes, it is believed to have been the earliest known school in Goffstown, going back to 1773.
Oh my gosh.
Before districts were formed. In 1805, it was moved from way up Page Hill to property close to the Jennings homes, Fred and Sylvia Jennings. It was right on the corner of their property. Then it was moved later on further down page closer to the Goffstown back road because it was getting to be quite a walk. The school closed in 1926, and an association was formed, the Little Red Schoolhouse Association. And these were all local people who lived around the neighborhood, all pitched in their money, and they maintained the school, and they had reunions on a yearly basis. You'll see pictures of this at the, this is the schoolhouse now. You can see that's it. But there's pictures with all the students having a reunion, but anyways, they died off. And the fun stopped. And by 1977, they gave the school. The association gave the school to the town of Goffstown, the Goffstown Historical Society. And there's a gentleman by the name of Moss. He was very instrumental. I think his name...
Fred.
Fred Moss. Okay. It was Fred Moss. And he was very instrumental in having the move made. They actually put it on trailers, and they brought it from Page Hill Road to where it sits today, Parker Station. And it's open weekends when they have open house, and you can go inside. There's a few pictures that we showed earlier as we were going through it. I've run a couple of classes in there, not formal classes, but I let people come in and we did a depiction of what it would have been like. And so it's a lot of fun. But that's a good place to go and hands-on.
Yeah. When you do this, you spare the rod, though, when you're teaching.
Yeah. Let the kids know there ain't no fooling around going on here,
I'm not going to your class.
No, I'm not going in there.
Yeah.
How about District 12?
Well, that was 12. That was the Page Hill School. So we'll go to 13.
13 then.
Was the Village School North. That was the one of the two in the beginning that were moved first. Nobody really can remember, other than pictures. We got a real nice picture. Well, it's not a real great picture. You can see the then and now, and it was the only brick schoolhouse we had. And this school, it went down early. They said it got pretty bad and run down, and they had to close that. That was one of the first schools to go. But the bricks, I just learned recently, were salvaged. And there is a brick building right now. This was right across from Sully's, right next to what is today is Tonic's Barber Shop.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
In the parking lot where that little brick schoolhouse was. Now, if you look to the left of that parking lot, there's a little brick house there. Well, it's a 2-story brick house, and it is believed, I learned recently, that the bricks that built that were from the schoolhouse.
They were used,
and they supplemented what they needed to build it. Mm-hmm. But that's where that's where that 13 was, District 13. And it was like being in the village, it was easy access. But it was one of the first to go.
Sure. You also have a journal entry here. Teacher of the winter term, Mr. Sylvester Brown of Bow, had limited experience when he commenced. However, after this term, it would be safe to regard him as an old and experienced instructor.
Yeah, that's
a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of work. Yeah, those are the exact words. That's how he described it. Yeah.
District 14.
District 14 was the John Plummer School, and now we're going back to Penardville. It was originally built on the corner of College Road and St. A's Drive, and it took care of all the kids, on that, where we'll say the east side of Penardville, down to Rockland Ave. They all walked up there, and that's what, eventually it was moved from the corner there of College Road. It was moved further. It's still there today. The St. A's College owns it. Oh. And we have a nice picture of it. And a lot of people might look at that picture and say, I've seen that. It looks just like that. That's what it was like. That's how it is today, but that was the John Plummer School. That was, it was actually 1871. It got a new name, Worthy School, District 14, but it was only for a short while before it closed. But it was always known And it actually finally sold about 1876 is when it sold, and it became a residence. And it's a residence today. But that took care of the College Road, St. A's Road, and that was school number 14.
And your journal entry here from 1854. We did not find the school in so good a state of improvement as we could wish, owing to a united cooperation on the part of the parents and want of good discipline on the part of the teacher. But little progress was made in many of the classes. The schoolhouse is not what it should be.
Yeah, yeah.
District 15.
Yeah, District 15 is a very little information about 15. It was called the Dow School, and it was located on the Goffstown back road, right about a half a mile from the line, the city line. So that would bring you down towards the sports, that big sports complex. You're right down in there.
Right.
And here again, numbers dwindled. Interest for Goffstown, it just wasn't there, and we annexed it. Goffstown annexed it to Manchester, and it became their problem. And so that school, we had no photo of it. Oh yeah, I think there is one old photo, but it's pretty. It's not a real clear picture, but so there was not a lot of history on that, but it was there, and it was our school.
Well, we have a journal entry here too from 1871.
Okay.
Only 1 month of school in the fall on account of the illness of the teacher. There is a very small number of pupils in the district, which ought to be united with 2 others. The schoolhouse came near to being burnt down, and if the villain flames had succeeded in their enterprise, the town would not have lost its choicest treasure.
Yeah, yeah, that's great entry.
These entries are amazing. I mean, they were just speaking of the times, and they were just being honest.
Being honest. So the parents, they got their annual reports, and they got to, here's what's going on in your child's school. Can you want to help us with this, or And so they had to have a talk with them, but they told it how it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because a lot of things you read about in these schools, things parents were concerned about, trying to address, are issues that go on today.
Yeah.
In different volumes, in different ways.
Yeah.
But we still...
Kids will always be kids. Yeah.
As much as things change, they don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The last thing we wanted to talk about, Mike, was, well, where did they all end up? And now you've heard me mention multiple times about the white school. Let's think back to 1873. They're building this state-of-the-art school for its time, 3 stories high. We're bringing all our students here. This was the plan. And in 1873, they still had no plumbing and heating. There was still limited electricity, if there was any at all. It was, so that we were it was basics, but it was, now we brought the kids together, fewer teachers, there were fewer schoolhouses. It minimized the upkeep. The bottom floor was used for grades 1 through 5, the smaller kids, and 6 through 12 were all up on the 2nd and 3rd floor. And so they shared it. One little story that just boggles my mind was, well, where did everybody go but it was a community privy. That was outside, and it was a little privy. Okay. And I found the privy holes I found in my search of through the years. Believe it or not. And so that was all before plumbing. The kids had to go outside. And the story that goes with it is, when they finally got plumbing, what do we do with the privy? Well, they put it up for auction, and the stove man in town bought the privy, and we have pictures of it in the parking lot of the Amoskeag Bridge. It was the Amoskeag Bridge, today's TD Bank. It was right in the parking lot, and he sold stoves and wood stoves, and he rented them for the winter, but he turned the privy into his stove business. So I always got a kick out of that.
What a nice privy.
But that was part of the white school, and that was the changed education, tremendously. it changed education in Goffstown. And it's come a long ways. And to the folks watching today, your children are getting the finest education there. They can, and believe me, it's not easy governing schools and giving everything that you want your kids to have between sports and the education required to go on in this world. Goffstown continues to do a tremendous job, I believe.
Got you there, yeah.
Well, again, this has been another fascinating discussion with our virtual Professor Emeritus of Goffstownology, Jim Boschman.
Maybe the Ken Burns of
There's
Goffstown.
there's one thing we talked
forgot,
about, but
yes.
we did not, and I was hoping you guys could.
Yes.
This is if maybe we could get it on the screen. This is an actual teacher's contract from 1923. And Eric, why don't you read a few of the requirements of a young teacher who was being employed?
Yeah, there were 13 terms to the contract. I'll just go over a couple of them. One was that you were never to get married. 2, not to keep any company with men. 3, you had to be home between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. unless in attendance at school functions. The teacher was not about to loiter in any ice cream stores downtown. They were not to smoke cigarettes. They were not to drink beer, wine, or whiskey. And the big one is that they were not to ride in carriages or automobiles with any man.
Yeah.
Except a brother or father. So even a cousin you can't go. And of course, no teacher can wear bright colors in school. No. And she could not dye her hair. Wow.
How long could their dress be?
Well, not more than 2 inches above the ankle. Yes, sir. And I'm sure the superintendent was there measuring daily.
So there were some restrictions.
Yeah, there was times were different back then. That's for sure.
Yeah, and these young teachers were there. There was one case where one was hired for $1 a month. She was given. They all got their free room and board, but eventually they were making $5 to $9 a month.
And this was a teacher's contract from 1923, and here it stated that they were paid a sum of $75 a month.
Yeah, yeah. So they moved up the. Yeah, you can see.
Now, what did they do with male teachers?
You know, male teachers made a little bit more than the girls, yeah. And
Some
there
things
is
have
no,
never changed.
there's no history of women teachers before 1800. It was, before it was just men, but eventually they learned that the women teachers, they could connect a little better with the children in some cases, and so they more and more, and pretty soon there were more women teachers than men. Yeah.
Something about maternal instincts, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Jim, Eric, thanks a lot.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for having me, and I look forward to our next episode of Grizzled Grizzlies.
We can't wait. All right.
Good
We'll
night.
see you soon.